It's Ben, and this is Drambo by Beep Street. This video is going to walk through two racks that are very similar that you can download from patch storage. One's called Roll Your Own, the other is called Player Piano. Right now, they're up near the top in the Drambo patch storage, but you can just search for their title or PC Richards. You'll find it. Player Piano lets you play different sequences just by pressing a key. And you can kind of make the sequence on your own. You can adjust the speed of the sequence, the timing, and you can play those sequences together. I realized after I made it, it's very similar to the finger sequencer in OP1. And then Roll Your Own is basically just a drum roll sequencer or like a repeat. Same idea, different keys will play different sequences. And as they're here, you can hear it. It's just like a basically drum roll. Both are pretty useful, I think. Both are a lot of fun. So I'll walk through the controls and then explain a little bit about how they're built. So when you open either of these, what you're going to see is the README will probably be open. You can read that. Simple instructions. But I have like 8 slots for C2 through to G2. And it would be very easy to add extra slots on your own if you wanted to, but I figured this is probably enough. And within each slot, depending on which rack you're looking at, you're going to have an LFO, which controls the timing. So you're going to see all of these are synced to the clock in some time division or other. And then you can control the frequency through which it goes through. There's a bend time control, and this should really be labeled swing or groove. This is going to let you control the swing of the time signal that's being sent from the LFO. And then there's a gate sequencer, which is where you can control the actual triggers that are being sent out from the sequencer. And then behind the scenes, there's a MIDI note generator in each of these little sections or slots, I think I called them. And all of those are going to a MIDI mixer, and that's what's being sent out of the MIDI rack. So same thing on the player piano, except you have a trigger or gate sequencer as well as a CV sequencer, so you can make a pitch sequence. Have to drag for some reason with my finger. And then at the end of this rack, because you're looking at pitch sequences, there's a CV quantizer, so you could put in whatever scale you want, like pitch scale, and then also adjust the range of that pitch or note scale. So you can have really high notes or kind of rein it in a little bit. So I'll just play around with it for a little bit, and then I'll kind of take it apart. So Roll Your Own. On C2, it's just going to play the drum. Or it's going to play the note. It's going to send it out. It's not going to be processed at all. But then C sharp 2 through to G2 are going to be different sequences. So here it's just going to play through. I think this is a full quarter beat, but we can change the timing. So this is like 8th notes. You can get really fast if you want. So this would be good for like trap drums, and I'll set up just a kick drum to play in the background. I can play along with this too. So you can sequence this in, or it can be live. So with the groove turned up, you can still hear it. Let's do C2. Okay. So these are 8th notes. You just kind of have to play around with this, but it lets you not have everything be just like straight on the beat as it's going through the time signal. And then if you wanted to, you can mess with the sequence. So it doesn't have to be like every step has a trigger on it. And you also have velocity control. So as long as your patch is responding to velocity, which my Flexi sampler with this hat is responding to velocity, you'll be able to use that in your little sequence as well. Sounds kind of cool. You can mess with the timing, so you can have this be like third beats if you want. That's kind of fun. So if you record this in, you can have multiple notes in the sequencer, but the notes are controlling which sequences are playing. And it's like this rack is polyphonic. So it will, you can have multiple sequences playing at the same time. They won't cut each other off. You would have to have polyphony, obviously, in your sound source to hear each sequence playing together. You can change the steps, number of steps. However, the timing will not always like go through the whole sequence. So just play around with the LFO. And these can be free running too. You can change it to frequency. And then it will actually go through the whole sequence if you wanted to. Now, only other thing here with this one, when you trigger, I need to be looking at the right one. So C2. You're going to see when I tap the note, it's going to re-trigger the LFO, which is going to start the sequence over again. And that's going to be true if the clock is running or not. Anyways, it's a drum roll machine. I think it should be pretty useful. Another just like nuance, it's not going to send any pitch information, which is probably good because you'd have, C2 on your like unprocessed MIDI, and it'd be C# being sent out on this one, and then D, which it might sound cool, but you might want them to all be the same pitch. Of course, you could P-lock in the pitch if you wanted, but because you're using the keys to trigger the sequences, I have it not sending any pitch information. Okay, and then over on this one, the player piano, same idea, except there's no like unprocessed note information going out. C2 has a sequence. Same exact thing. It's going to send, LFO is going to clock a sequencer, two sequencers, and it's generating MIDI notes that are being sent out. You can adjust length of the sequences. You can adjust your groove here. You can do all of that. The only additional control that you need to be aware of on this one, I do have like a quantize control. So this no sync, this is an X fader or crossfader, and it basically allows you to send like a gate directly from a trigger. So the sequences start exactly when you tap a key. Or if you want this to be sort of quantized to the clock, you're going to see there's, I should have labeled this too, the gate and velocity sequencer. When the clock is running, it's going to be basically synced. I'm going to turn this up. It will sync to this trigger. So your sequences can be in time with each other. And we could turn that way up so they're like even more in time. I don't know why we'd need to do that, but now it's like they'll only come in if you're holding down on a key, come in on the downbeat of 1. Or you can have it be like kind of an odd timing. Anyways, that's what that control does. So if you don't want it to be synced at all, if you want to be able to trigger it when the clock isn't running, turn it to no sync. If you do want it quantized, turn it all the way to the right. You can do that. Now, if you don't want to play multiple sequences, or you only want to like have 2 or 3 sequences going at a time, this is like the sequence polyphony. So 1, turn it to no sync. So they're sort of like cutting each other off. I can just have 2 sequences at a time. I like to leave it at 8 most of the time. I realize this isn't really a quantized control. I'm having a lot of fun with this one, just because you can have like create sequences of notes that you probably wouldn't like enter into the step sequencer, and then you can also mess around with the clocks of all of these, or like the timing, etc., with p-locks. So I'm going to record in something real quick. Didn't record. Okay. And even if I have this set to no sync, if I'm recording quantized, it's going to quantize the notes that I enter in. So what I think is really fun is to, once you have some stuff recorded in here, you can mess with the timing. So I have this F2. So you can see it's running at this speed, but we can make it go really quick on like certain steps. So it like runs through real quick like that. We could have it go back to slower. We could add in some weird groove. We do that here. And then, you know, if you wanted to, you could even have it go backwards. I haven't done this yet. So saw up is, it's basically sending from start to finish clock time. So it's a clock that starts at the beginning and ends at the end of a sequence. But if we change it to saw down, so now it's going to go backwards. Just leave it at bipolar, because time signal, or leave it not on bipolar, unipolar. Time signal starts at 0 and goes to 1. It doesn't start at -1. So we can pause that. And you could also p-lock the scale. If you want to. This is, I don't know what this is. I guess it's just, doesn't matter. There must not be any high notes in this section that I'm p-locking it on. That's really it. These are pretty simple. There's not much more to talk about, so I won't say anything else. I will deconstruct the patch now, so if you want to stop watching, go ahead and stop watching. Anyways, these can be downloaded, again, patch storage. Okay, so I've compacted the player piano patch, kind of like scaled it down. I'm going to open it up now. So this is like the meat of the patch. So in each section, from C2 to G2, you have a MIDI note filter. So this module is basically looking for MIDI from where? The MIDI node generator. And this is where the gate's coming from. So we need that, the synced or non-synced gate. So it's just looking for C2. There's a MIDI to CV after that for one voice. My LFO is going to be re-triggered by the gate. So when I tap down, it's going to start my clock over. The LFO is my clock. Bend time, which I don't use too much, but I think it's fun to have it there. It's using the LFO as a time signal, and then both of my sequencers are getting their time from the bend time sequencer. You're free to mess around with any and all of the sequencer parameters. Then you are getting a gate signal from the gate and velocity sequencer. You're getting a velocity sequencer or velocity signal from the gate and velocity sequencer, and you're getting those are going into this MIDI note generator, and then you also have pitch coming from the CV sequencer. So the reason you don't always hear this going is because these are multiply modules, and it's multiplying the gate signal and the velocity signal by the gate that's coming into this section through the MIDI note filter. So only when I'm holding down C2 are we going to actually hear the MIDI notes being generated, because the gate is being multiplied. I guess I didn't actually need to multiply velocity, but I did. So it's there. I could probably take that out. You won't get any MIDI notes if there's no gate information coming in, so velocity isn't really important here. And then that is just repeated 7 times in these other categories. All of the MIDI notes being generated go into this MIDI mixer. Then we convert the MIDI back into CV. I have it turned to 8 voices. They go through a CV quantizer. So I did it this way so that you didn't have to go into each little section and set the scale there. Although you could do that if you wanted to. So here it's like a global CV quantizer for all of the MIDI coming out of this patch, goes back into a MIDI note generator, and then when you close this, it just goes before a MIDI to CV module, and you can use it with whatever instruments or sound sources you want, or you could output it to another app. So the Quantize, I think this is kind of useful. So when you set it to Quantize, apparently sometimes it can get a little bit stuck. Yeah, so I don't know exactly what this is, but I would guess, let's see if I can fix this. Yeah, change it back to 8. So this is a bug we'll have to work through, but I'll let you hear it anyways. The reason it's doing that is there's a sample and hold module, and when you have it set to sync, no sync, it's getting its signal from this sample and hold. Sample and hold is looking for a gate signal, but it's sampling that gate signal from the gate and velocity sequencer. So apparently something is stuck in there right now. That's my guess. And I don't know how to unstick it. If we leave it there, we just clear the sequence maybe? Okay, that'll have to do. So it's looking for a gate, and then when it hits that trigger, it's going to sample the gate. On the next gate, it's going to look for another trigger. So if I take my finger off, it's going to keep playing until it gets to that next gate. I'm going to guess that that's why it was messed up. Okay, So something happened in here. It might have been because there's like, I have 8 sequences that can play. So there's really 8 gate and velocity sequencers and sample and holds, sending MIDI out to these different sequencers. So like a gate got stuck essentially, or was turned on, whether it's because I had notes in this sequencer here or some other reason, I don't know. If you get that happening, uh, turn it to no sync, and then you might mess with the polyphony, clear some of the notes out of the sequencer, or just like reinitialize the patch. I don't know. And then roll your own works exactly the same, except there isn't any pitch sequence going on. And on C2, it's just passing the note through. There's no sequence in C2. If you have any questions about how either of these work, let me know. If this bug is really annoying, let me know and I'll try and troubleshoot it, but I think it might be related to like recorded notes in the step sequencer, kind of like keeping the gate on in certain ways. So play with the timing, should go away. So see, it's going to keep playing. And then if you have it where there's like no open gate, it will stop playing. I think that's why. And you can always just turn it to no sync and you won't have it stuck. That's a good way to like kill it if you need to. Okay. If you have any questions, let me know. Have fun. Thanks.